Right, it's now 6:03. Sorry, we're a little bit late in getting started, just some technical gremlins behind the scenes. Thank you to everyone who is attending tonight. It's the first GCP West Community Forum, where we're going to go through several projects on the horizon and have an opportunity to ask questions throughout. Just a little bit of housekeeping. It feels like we've been doing this type of meeting for a very long time now, but there are still it's still worth saying. Obviously, we're all online. We're all speaking from our own homes or other locations, so there's always a possibility of technical gremlins getting in the works and causing issues with the live feed. If so, please be patient with us while we sort ourselves out. There shouldn't be issues. There's fire alarms everywhere I know. So the main speakers tonight, I'll introduce my colleagues now. First one is going to be Isabel Wade, who's the GCP's Assistant Director for Sustainability and Inclusive Growth. And Isabel is going to be talking about the Making Connections consultation. And I'm going to have some question and answer session on that. And then move on to a presentation by Joe Baker, who many of you know, who will be able to, as you know, is the project manager of Cambourne Cambridge. He also is responsible for the GCP's Eastern Access consultation, and will also be able to speak about Greenways and the like on Madingley Road. Sorry, I'll just share an agenda for people to see. Let me see if I can share my screen so people can get an idea of the indicative timings. If at any point though, please do shout up if you have any questions on the running order now. I'd also finally like to introduce my colleague, Joe Field. Joe is going to be our facilitator for the Q&A sessions, very experienced in facilitation of public meetings, be able to help us through that. If people could please save their questions for the end of each individual presentation, we'll be able to deal with them all in that time. And please keep your questions, as cogent as possible, so we can hear from everybody and get through the questions in that May. If there's nothing else from any of my colleagues, I'll hand over to my colleague Isabel Wade to begin tonight's first presentation.
Great, thank you, Tom. Hello, everybody, and great to be speaking to you all this evening. I'm just going to try to share my screen and hoping very much that it's going to work. Could one of my GCP colleagues just confirm that you can see my screen, please?
Yes, I can see it.
Excellent, thank you. So I'm going to talk about the Making Connections consultation. So this consultation is primarily about three things. So our proposals for a transformative improvement to the bus network, how we can create more space for those buses as well as for cycling and walking, and to enhance our public spaces, and how we might fund these sorts of improvements, including through a potential charge on vehicles or a parking charge. So I think a lot of you will be very aware of some of the pressures that the area is facing over the coming years. So this includes things like, we're expecting a lot of jobs and homes kind of through the local plan in the area. That means kind of more people needing to travel around. We have high levels of carbon emissions already in our area, poor air quality as well. And so what we're aiming to do with these proposals is to reduce traffic and reduce the amount of time that bus passengers and car drivers are spending stuck in traffic, help more people access work, education, health service, green spaces, improve our air quality, reduce our carbon emissions, and free up more space so that we can have better walking and cycling facilities, as well as kind of making wider improvements to kind of public health and public realm as well. So just a little bit more on our proposals. So we're consulting on a new bus network, which is aiming to run faster, more regular and more reliable bus services across the Greater Cambridge area and beyond. Better walking and cycling routes through kind of lower traffic levels, which would create more opportunities for us to make improvements. A sustainable transport charge, so how funding in future could be raised for these elements, and also how we might want to improve public spaces as a result of lower traffic levels as well. So just talking first of all about a transformed bus network. So we really are talking about a step change in provision from what is currently through these proposals. So we're talking about most market towns, most larger villages having a bus service every 10 minutes into Cambridge, and some of those would be express services, which would cut journey times kind of into the city by up to 30 minutes, depending on kind of where you are. In rural areas, talking about hourly services, and within the city as well, having connections about every 10 minutes in some instances, more like every 5 minutes. So I'll say a little bit more about these in a minute, but the aim is that kind of this would be a more comprehensive network with longer operating hours, more frequent services. And we're also looking at fares. So how can we make it more affordable for people to travel by bus, whether that be through introducing kind of lower flat fares, introducing kind of lower fares across the board, or specific discounts for groups of people who, you know, find it hardest to access bus travel at the moment. So this is quite a detailed map, and I'm sure it's showing quite small on your screen, so we will zoom in and kind of look at some of the areas to the west in a minute, but just to give you a sense of the scale of change of bus services, we're looking at kind of many more services, many more routes, and in particular looking at kind of how can we connect places up better. So the current bus network has very much evolved on the basis of kind of Cambridge city centre. Actually, we know that people want to get to many more places than that, and so how can we link people up with the hospital, with the science park, with West Cambridge site, with their nearby market towns and villages, and give people that better connectivity that makes it easier to make journeys by bus. So just in terms of the city, so we haven't kind of drawn a detailed map for the city. We're not at kind of that point in the proposals at the moment. What we have done is set out some kind of principles and some key routes that we want to see kind of large improvements on for the city, and we're kind of asking people about where they make journeys so we can design that network in more detail as part of the next phase of the plan. So what we're kind of saying for those bus city proposals at the moment is around kind of longer operating hours, so buses running 5 AM to midnight, higher frequency services, having more direct services to places like the biomedical campus, the hospital, the science park, as well as more cross-city services, introducing some of these as express services, but also making sure that kind of residential areas are picked up and well connected, not just kind of into the city centre, but also together. We want people to be kind of within easy access of this bus network, so making sure that people are around a 5-minute walk on average from bus stop. A lot of people would be a lot closer, and equally being kind of around 7 minutes from a bus stop with faster services as well. And then, as I mentioned before, cheaper fares. So more widely across the network, again, having longer operating hours, so services operating 5 AM to midnight, having kind of a higher frequency in the core hours of the day, plus new express services, and making sure that kind of rural areas are much better served through kind of hourly services, and looking at how we can plug smaller places into the network. Not all villages have the kind of population size that's possible to support a kind of bus service at this scale, but actually making sure that people still have opportunities to get into the network, whether that would be through some sort of demand responsive kind of service, or a kind of connecting service, or by using a travel hub as well. So just to talk in a little bit more detail about that bus network then, and kind of what we're looking at for each corridor. So in the kind of Cambourne St Neots corridor, we're looking at having kind of more express and stopping services running through here, so every 10 minutes, in kind of having bus services also that connect up with Huntingdon, and making sure that those onward connections to places like the Science Park, the City Centre, Cambridge Station, Addenbrooks, are kind of picked up in the routing. In terms of the rural services, we're looking at kind of services to the south of the kind of to the villages in the south of the area, being hourly and connecting people into the faster routes in from Cambourne, and sometimes directly onto the city centre as well. In the North Stowe and St Ives corridor, again, looking at high frequency services coming into the city, and some of those as as has been the case, running into Science Park, onto Addenbrooke's and the biomedical campus, but also again introducing more rural connecting services so that people can plug into the high frequency busway services more easily, and kind of make an onward journey as well. So all those, the kind of bus network improvements, so making it kind of faster, more reliable, increasing the coverage, increasing frequency and operating hours, plus looking at fares, we estimate that improvements of that scale would cost around £40 million a year. And, in some cases, there will be some revenue recovered from fares because hopefully more people will take the bus, and therefore there'll be more fare income. But I think it's fair to say that the experience of places like London, which of course has a much more comprehensive bus network as well as a kind of more simplified and cheaper fare system, is that even kind of when you have a well-used service, if you want to offer people a real alternative to their car, you're going to need to put some ongoing support in to make that happen. So what the work to date has shown us is that if we want to make public transport, cycling and walking an attractive, fast and reliable alternative to the car, then we need two things. We need to cut congestion and free up road space for more services, and we need to raise money to invest in additional services, cheaper fares and improved walking and cycling routes as well. So just to bring out a bit about the three options that the consultation asks about for doing this. So on the left-hand side of your screen, you'll see pollution charge and a flexible charge. So these are both versions whereby a car driving within a certain area would be charged for that. It would be a daily charge. And under a pollution charge, that charge would be based on the emissions of the vehicle. Under a flexible charge, it might be based on, for example, the time of day or the day of the week in order to target the busiest times. In terms of parking charges, that may include kind of increasing charges, looking at places that aren't charged at the moment, but also something called a workplace parking levy, which is a yearly fee that is charged to organisations for the parking spaces that they offer to employees at workspaces. And businesses have a choice as to what they do about this charge. They can pass it on to their staff, they could choose to pay it themselves, they could choose to reduce the amount of car parking they offer in order to reduce the amount of charge that's owed, or not have to pay the charge. So those are the kind of options that we want to hear views on, and in the consultation we set out a bit of information about each of them in terms of their impacts on traffic levels and revenue and air quality. And we then asked some questions around, if we were to look at these, what are the key design considerations? So things like the hours it should operate, the area, the price, as well as questions about how any sort of charging might impact on you, on kind of your families, etc., so that we can kind of, as we move into the next phase, make sure that we're taking this all on board. So just to kind of finish with a couple of other kind of wider points. So City Access, which is the kind of project that sits behind the Making Connections consultation, is a key part of the wider GCP transport programme, which includes, as many of you will be aware, high quality segregated routes for electric buses as well as for active travel, key upgrades to the radial routes, as well as a network of greenways and travel hubs. And City Access is really the glue in the middle of all of this. So it's, we know from our work that we need new infrastructure in order to provide the capacity for people to travel sustainably, but we also need to be able to provide really good bus services using that infrastructure, but also plugging into that infrastructure so that people do have a real alternative to the car. And we know that we need, particularly kind of within the city, we need that extra road to create that extra space so that the buses can run fast and reliably, and also that we can have a safer walking and cycling environment as well. And what we kind of are bringing forward in this consultation, it's still kind of relatively high level proposals at this stage. We're very keen to get feedback so that we can shape what we do going forward, but it's very much grounded in kind of what we've been told before. So back in 2019, we had ran a consultation called Choices for Better Journeys, which asked people about what they wanted to see from public transport, as well as asked about some of the charging options that we're asking about again in this consultation. And we also ran a citizens' assembly, which is where a group of people from across the Greater Cambridge area and the wider travel to work area were selected kind of through a kind of random but kind of demographically representative process to come together and discuss these issues over the course of 4 days. So they were able to kind of get into detail on some of the evidence and hear from a wide range of voices on what we should do about these issues. And they very much put affordable, fast and reliable public transport at the heart of what they wanted to see, as well as looking at kind of lower traffic levels, more walking and cycling as well. So we've very much kind of grounded what we're doing in kind of what we've been told before. So as I said, really keen to hear what people think. So obviously we'll come on to questions in a second, but we do have a survey online that can be completed. We're happy to take questions by email as well. And the consultation will close at midday on Monday, the 20th of December. Following that, the feedback will be collated and analysed, and consultation report and recommendations will be submitted to our executive board in June 2022. One thing I should say that's very important is that if we were to go forward with any of these proposals, and for that I mean kind of the proposals around the bus network just as much as any charging proposals, there would be a further consultation following that June board on the more detailed proposals. So this is kind of the chance to have your say at a high level, but there will be another opportunity as well next summer. So thank you very much. I will take the slides down now.
Thanks, Isabel. Hi, everyone. I'm Jo Field. Perhaps my GCP colleagues can let me know if you can hear me okay, because I had problems with my headphones, so I'm using the computer mic, which is never the best. Yeah, I'm Jo. I'm the Chief Executive of JFG Communications, so I'm an independent chair and facilitator tonight. So my job is to facilitate the questions and answers and to make sure we stick to time. So now is your opportunity to ask Isabel questions on making connections. You can either do that by putting your questions in the chat or using the raise your hand function. So I'll take a mix of questions from the chat and people who have raised their hands. I don't see any questions yet. One, okay. A question from John Martin. Over to you, John. I think we need to unmute John. Okay, that should work now, John, if you want to ask your question.
I don't have a question.
Okay, sorry, I thought your hand was raised. Do you have one in the chat now? Will there still be a need for the C2C guided busway, given road pricing and the need to reduce traffic going into Cambridge?
Cool, thanks, Jo. So I'll say a little bit about this, but I'll also ask Jo Baker to say a bit too, as the kind of project lead. So very much yes, the work to date has shown that, you know, the number of people that we need to get using public transport is really significant. We're talking about kind of 15% fewer people driving than there were in 2011, which, if you kind of take into account the growth levels that we're seeing in this area, as well as kind of kind of other factors, that's a really big number of people to shift. So what our work has shown is we need everything. We need the infrastructure, we need the services, we need the space for public transport, for walking and cycling. But Joe, I didn't know if you wanted to pick anything up more specifically.
Yeah, thanks, Isabel. I mean, we'll have a bit of a chance to talk about C2C after I run through a quick update as to where we are. But there's been some sort of further work done looking at the impact of the draft local plan that has looked at a range of measures, and that includes making connections and transport schemes such as C2C, really to verify that if we put the whole package together, we can accommodate the level of growth that's needed. But the result is we really need a combination of both. What making connections does is make C2C more effective, because as buses get towards the city centre, obviously they would otherwise risk getting snarled up in congestion, and this hopefully relieves a significant amount of the congestion. So it's very complementary.
Thank you for that, Joe and Isabel. Are there any other questions for Isabel on making connections, or shall we just move on to the next presentation? I don't see any raised hands and no more questions in the chat either. So I'm happy to just move on to your presentation, Joe, on C2C.
Right, can you hear me and see the screen? Hello?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. So I suspect most of you know I'm Joe Baker, and I've been leading on the Cambourne Cambridge scheme. We aren't providing a new major update on the project at this point in time. People will be aware it went to our executive board on the 1st of July. But in order to sort of form part of this sort of forum, we wanted to give you a quick update that we've also presented to some of the parish councils in the area. So just as an update, some of you will be aware of this already. The scheme was put on hold in the summer of 2020 following objections from the mayor, and we commissioned independent audit review of the scheme in December 2020. That reported back to the board on 1st of July 2021. The audit found there was no reason why the executive board should not proceed in the next stage of development of the scheme, and that report is published on our website. And at the 1st of July meeting, the board approved the outline business case and asked the project team to go ahead with the next stage of the work, which is undertaking a full environmental impact assessment. And that's the work that's ongoing at the present. That is obviously intended to answer quite a few of the questions that have been raised to us about what the environmental impacts of the scheme might be. So just as a very quick summary of the audit, for those not aware, the scheme was concluded to be aligned with national, regional and local policies. Stakeholder engagement has been robust. Not everybody has agreed with every step of the way, but there has been extensive engagement. The environmental impact of the scheme, as we'd anticipate, is mixed and needs further work, and that's the work we're doing at the moment on the EIA. The business case itself follows the relevant government guidance, is robust and valid, and many alternative route options have been put forward and considered in line with guidance. And indeed, a number of those are route options that have been proposed by the local community. Also, the assumptions and constraints which have informed the outline business case are valid, but the audit noted that there are changes such as the long-term impact of COVID-19, changing policy towards climate change, change in national bus policy, and also long-term east-west rail also need to be reflected in the next stage of the business case, and that clearly will need to be the case. So just to summarise the route, which I think most people will be aware of already, it is the Cambourne Cambridge scheme. It runs from Cambourne to Cambridge. Services along the scheme run through Cambourne itself, through the proposed Bourne airfield development, and then down a new alignment that passes to the north of Hardwick and to the north of Coton, and then down through the west Cambridge University campus towards Grange Road, from which services continue on through the city to the key employment site. So obviously the city centre itself, but also there's the potential for routes to go off towards the science park at the biomedical campus and elsewhere. We are still working closely with East West Rail, and the intention is to tie in with the planned Bedford to Cambridge rail link as and when a route for that is selected and when a location for a Cambourne station is selected. At the moment, there is no confirmation yet whether a station would be to the north or the south of Cambourne. So we're really waiting to have some greater clarity. So as we've said previously, for the time being, the route would carry on street into Cambourne, and a new extension to a new railway station would be required and provided once there is some clarity on that. And there's further details on the scheme on the web through our website. I'm sure many of you are aware of that already. Just addressing a few of the concerns that have been raised previously, particularly on the environmental side, the aim is that our schemes will be served by modern electric public transport vehicles to limit air pollution and noise. There will be a minimum requirement of 10% biodiversity net gain, but the objective is 20%. So that's where any sort of habitat such as hedgerow trees are lost, that at least 10% more than is lost would be provided. But the aim, as I say, is to have 20%, which creates a bit of a safety margin. We have working groups set up dealing with issues such as non-motorised user access, landscape heritage and ecology, and that provides opportunity for some stakeholders to also contribute along the way to the discussion. Before the scheme was paused, a number of environmental surveys and assessments have already been undertaken. Some of those are already published on our website. Others dealing with a range of ecological issues are being undertaken at the moment, and work is now apace on the environmental impact assessment. That work did carry on. It was agreed that some seasonal surveys, such as, for example, bat service, could be undertaken while the audit review was underway, because they can only be done at certain times of year, but other surveys are ongoing now. So the next stage is the full environmental impact assessment. We are in the process of identifying further surveys, and in undertaking those, we've started a process of engaging with landowners and communities to start talking about the way forward, and we're developing both designs and a draft EIA. There will be a final public consultation next year, which will present the more detailed designs and the emerging main factors of the draft EIA. That will then be pulled together and formally sort of submitted to government, and then there'll be a final formal consultation undertaken by government once it's submitted. Community contributions have influenced in other aspects of the scheme, issues around travel hub and stop location, some refinements of the route alignment and design, for example, a suggestion to sort of realign to avoid the waterworks site entirely, and of course previous discussions about choice of park and ride, a commitment to improve noise barriers on the A428, and to improve pedestrian and cycling access to the travel hub. There'll be ongoing engagement through the non-motorised user and landscape and ecology groups, but also continuing meetings with the likes of the parish councils. And following any consultation, any further scheme amendments may be made to reflect further mitigation of impacts before we produce the final EIA for submission. So just a few of the issues. I'm sure some of these will come up in questions or discussion, but one particular one has been looking at the impact on St Neots Road, and some people may be aware there has been a recent consultation on a possible new traffic regulation order for St Neots Road. That would be a mechanism to introduce a bus gate to the east of Hardwick. Clearly, we're waiting the outcomes of the consultation and what the views were. But that would have a potential to reduce traffic on St Neots Road and enable an online alignment to the east of the Cambridge Road. That would reduce significantly the environmental impact on that section of St Neots Road, and also significant benefits, because it would massively reduce the amount of through traffic that's going past people's houses. Obviously, it has no impact on the A428, which will remain regardless. Clearly, the use of public transport should reduce the number of private vehicles on the road, and as I said, it's very much complementary to what's being talked about for making connections. And the estimation is around 10 buses an hour total. And as has been said, for making connections, the aim is for around 5 in the morning to midnight. Service is likely to calm down at the ends of that, but that's the sort of range. So certainly not 24/7 as has possibly been suggested. In terms of air pollution, the intention is to use modern electric buses, although, as we've always said, we will need to wait to ensure that the right vehicles are available on the market. Given the massive progress that's been made on electric vehicles in the last few years, I think we're very, very confident that vehicles with an adequate range will be available from opening year. What is important is that if we do have to run any non-electric buses for the first year or so while we are getting the new fleet in place, it will be very much based around low emission buses, the sort of things that are consistent with the requirements, say, for the London Clean Air Zone. So the impact on air quality will remain very, very minimal. Obviously, it's a fairly small number of vehicles, so the impact on noise will be modest. Assuming they are electric from day one, then even more so. I think we're all aware how relatively quiet electric vehicles are. Bus stops, there's further input needed on design and locations. We've had some discussions with Hardwick Parish Council, and there's been discussion at Cambourne Parish Council where I think there are differing views about the desirability of a stop, but certainly we'll need to look at final locations and layouts. And importantly, in terms of road safety, all layouts will be subject to road safety audit, and any sort of walking and cycling facilities will be upgraded along the route throughout. So there'll be an end-to-end Cambourne Cambridge walking and cycling facility, and where appropriate, that will also include facilities for equestrians as well. So in terms of the active travel route, the aim is an end-to-end walking and cycling provision along the route. That also will complement the Consultation Greenway, and I'll talk a little bit about the Greenways later on, which will run along the route to the south of C2C. But in addition to that, the Greenways will hopefully link both to Hardwick and Bourne Airfield, subject to agreements with the developer and funding around that. There's also connectivity between the routes using Long Road and Cambridge Road. So that gives us some north-south routes to complement the east-west routes. And as some people will be aware, some sections have already started. So work on a section by the M11 Bridleway was completed in April 2021, and we are looking for other quick wins around the Greenways network. The Greenway crosses the M11 at Coton and goes along the south side of the West Cambridge campus, but as I'll talk a bit more about those shortly, and also the Madingley Road cycle improvements, which will also help to provide connection on the A1303. We have been asked, there seem to be lots of cycle schemes, and I think the answer is yes. We are looking to have an extensive cycle network across the city to really make it easy for people to get around through non-motorised modes. And I think people who have travelled around on the continent, particularly places like Denmark and the Netherlands, will recognise that it's pretty much a default on most roads rather than just something that's there as an extra or an add-on. And just finally, you saw this slide already, but it is important to remember that this is part of a wide network. So the scheme sits alongside a series of other schemes to the north, south, east and west, and the Making Connections project in the middle. Obviously, previously, there was discussion of the CAM project, which would be a series of tunnels connecting these schemes. That has been hotly debated, and I think people are aware will not be proceeding. The Making Connections scheme really provides an alternative, promoting a really strong bus network with more frequent services, but providing also access to a wider range of urban and rural locations, but also the demand management side. So helping create space for walking and cycling and to just improve public spaces, as well as raising some of the money needed to pay for those improvements. So information, as always, can be found on our website. I think people know where that is anyway, but you'll be able to get that later. And so very happy to take any questions on the scheme.
Thanks very much for that, Joe. And yeah, just the same as before, you can either ask questions using the raise your hand function or in the chat. If you want to ask a question in the chat and you would like the other attendees to see your question, can you please make sure that in the to box you have selected everyone rather than just hosts and panelists? So we have one question in the chat already that's come through to the hosts and panelists. So I'm going to start with that one. The map of Cambridge to stop at Cotton, this has not been shown on previous maps. Why is it shown on this one? And what is the timetable for GCP looking seriously at an interim road on Madingley Hill, as was raised in the audit report?
Okay, Thanks for that, Marilyn. I think there's two things. The issue of a stop at Coton has been discussed before, and I think it's been raised a couple of times at parish council meetings when probably both of us have been there. I think there is, we've raised it as an option previously, so it's not the first time it's been raised. We think it would be an excellent idea, and it would offer great benefits to the local community. And certainly, I think it's been raised. People have asked us at previous parish council meetings why there may not be one. So I think we are showing it as something that we think would add a lot of value in order to enable people to get to the different destinations they might want to get to. In terms of an on-road option, we've carried on looking at that, and the Madingley Road cycle improvements came out of previous investigations of what realistically could be provided on the Madingley Road. The audit report flagged up that there would be some potential benefit to doing so, and we are looking at what else could be done. But we have, as I think you'll be aware, previously looked at what's available online without starting to eat into properties and land, and the actual physical space available is limited. So the benefits we can get from that are not great compared to the cost of any sections of online widening and the significant disruption that we would be causing if we did start widening online. So we can only do a limited amount. We're not going to get huge benefit from it. What we do think is valuable is to look at the improvements to Madingley Road in terms of cycling and walking, and also then looking at the signals along there where we know that there are some significant challenges. We are also talking to National Highways, who are looking at what could be done at M11 Junction 13, although you'll be aware they've looked at that previously as well. So again, looking at what could be done to get some benefits along the Madingley Road, but mainly that will be about things like improving traffic signals to try and make it operate a bit more effectively.
Thanks, Joe. And a few more questions coming through in the chat now. So we have one from Erica. How is a heavily trafficked road, brackets busway, cutting through one of the very few green spaces centre consistent with environmental concerns and needing to have residents?
Okay, thanks, Erica. Obviously, we're acutely aware not everybody wants to see the scheme. However, we do need to find a way of enabling people to get in and out of the city. And so the challenge really is to weigh up what the alternatives are. And a busway is a relatively low carbon way of getting people in and out of the city compared to the alternatives, which might, for example, be road widening or even a new road into the city in the longer term, which clearly we want to avoid. So just to be clear, this is a public transport route. It's not a road for general traffic. And really that the whole intention is to make sure that we don't need to start road building instead, which would have been perhaps the more traditional way forward. In terms of cutting through the very few green spaces near the city, there are a range of green spaces. This cuts primarily through agricultural land with very, very little access. So, the impact in terms of access to what people can actually access is not that great. We will be looking to ensure that there are still good public rights of way and that there's no sort of loss of accessibility across the area.
Thanks, Joe. Another question here from John Martin. The original reason for the busway was the congestion on Madingley Hill. The congestion is much less now, so why do we need the busway?
Yeah, I think we've always recognised that COVID-19 has been a little bit of a game changer. At the moment, congestion is definitely less. I think the latest data we got, though, was that road traffic levels are already up to 85% of what they were pre-COVID and climbing. And obviously not everybody is back at the workplace yet. And the university, for example, hasn't sort of fully gone back to the way it was operating. Certainly tourism, which is obviously a major driver in Cambridge, hasn't come back yet. So yes, at the moment it's not. We will be keeping that under review. I think if there is a conclusion that the world has changed and traffic levels at Cambridge never go back to where they are, then we would probably need to take a stop take and think, well, what's different? But we're also aware that we've got potentially another 3,500 houses going onto Bourne Airfield and about 2,500 going on to Cambourne West. So that's also another 6,000 new houses that would potentially be generating traffic if we can't find an alternative from them. So yes, if like COVID-19's maybe bought us some time, if we never get moved back to same levels of traffic, we may have to turn around and look at what's happening. And it's important to note this scheme will go through both a public inquiry, which would be potentially in about 18 months' time, and we'd then provide a full business case for the scheme that would come after that, and that both those would have to recognise what had happened. So yes, if there never is any congestion again, that would be a wonderful thing. On the other hand, if it does get back to where it was, we then need to make sure we have got something in hand, and we can't go back to the levels of congestion we saw previously.
Thank you for that, Joe. Now, you did touch a little bit on engagement with Highways England, or National Highways as they're now rebranded. This question's from Andrew Butler. Have you engaged with Highways and to upgrade the A421, A428? Will Madingley Road still joining the M11 southbound? Surely a link at Girton makes more sense with measures to discourage commuters using Madingley Road, which is the largest question.
Yeah, I mean, we've been round this topic frequently, and the A14, A428 interchange is not on the schedule for upgrade. I think most people are aware National Highways have recently undertaken a huge upgrade of the A14, and in doing that, they reviewed all the potential options. There was local encouragement to them, including from ourselves, to look at the possibility of changing to Girton Interchange. That was not selected, and that is not selected in their current changes to the route improvement strategy, which basically defines their work program. So yes, we're aware that that would address some issues. It might be another way of doing it. It simply isn't on the agenda, and there is no imminent sign of that happening. So again, the danger is we sit and wait for potentially years for something that may never happen, in the hopes that that would resolve problems.
Thank you. Now, just a couple of final questions. So one from Alan Everett. Could upgrades to cycling on St Neots Road be done now? That would be a real improvement for cycling ahead of anything else, e.g. Busgate or C2C.
Potentially, Alan. I mean, we've had discussion about possible local highway improvement schemes, and I think we we would have had this meeting not been scheduled tonight. We hopefully might have been talking to yourselves at Hardwick Parish Council this evening, which could touch on those issues. So absolutely, if we can work that out at the same time, then we may see if there are some quick win opportunities. It does depend about land ownership and things like that, and it does also depend on whether or not the bus gate itself goes forward, because the bus gate enables us to save a lot of road width. But yeah, we'll be hopefully coming along to Parish Council soon, and very keen to talk to yourselves about what could be done to improve facilities in the area.
Great. And then we have one final question from Erica Jacobs. What will be the impact of an additional 20 buses per hour, so 10 each direction, on Grange Road?
So at the moment on Grange Road, there's already 4 U buses, plus in happier times, the tourist buses as well. So that typically was around 12 an hour already. And that again was before we considered making connections. So at that point in time, there was no, well, still is no real control on parking in the area, no management of demand overall. What we're looking at will be mechanisms to reduce the amount of other traffic, also the amount of traffic park in the area. And it is not that big an increase. So at the moment, they're already probably, well, when the tourist buses are running, over half that number of buses already running on Grange Road, and the U buses would be subsumed into the widest network. So this would not necessarily be on top of the U bus, that would be part of the wider level of service. So there will be some more buses, but the aim is there'll be significantly less cars as well. So very much a change in the way it's operating. Thanks,
Joe. One final question has come in actually, which I'll take because we're on good time. Our current traffic levels coming into Hardwick Street, Neots Road, are still 60% of pre-COVID November 2018 record. Where is the 85% measured, please?
That's based on long-term monitoring right around the city. So it's not just a couple of counts at one point. It's about long-term monitoring stations of traffic and that are across the city. So yeah, I think that data may be published on the Smart Cambridge website. Isabel may know more than me. But yeah, if anyone's interested, I'm sure we can find a bit more information.
Yeah, I'm happy to take away an action to provide the link to some of that data.
Okay, so are there any more questions?
I think there's one more from Becky, which is
Oh, yes.
about how many years to offset CO2 emissions. We're not building a new wide road through the Greenbelt. We are building a new busway. We will be looking at the sort of balance of carbon, obviously, that fits within this, both looking to see how we can reduce the amount of carbon, but also looking at what the impacts are. But again, I'd reiterate, we're not comparing this with doing nothing. The issue is how we are going to deal with growth in Cambridge, which at the moment is something that is still happening. And you know, clearly we're all aware of the longer term concerns about climate, but as things stand, we still need to find houses for people to live in. So, you know, we will also be looking at what the alternatives could be in terms of the need for road building or other mechanisms. So, but that's something that the environmental impact assessment will be presenting. And when it comes to public inquiry, I'm sure will be a strong topic of debate, given the commitments that the local authorities have made around the climate crisis.
Okay, thank you for that, Joe. Are there any more questions either in chat or does anyone want to raise their hand? It's looking good. Okay. Yeah, I'm handing back to Tom now, or do you have another presentation?
I'll just run through a couple of slides on the Greenways.
Ah, yes, Greenways. Thank you.
So hopefully people can see the slides, hopefully. So just a very quick update on the Greenways. Again, people will be aware mainly about this already, that the plan is for 12 greenways to provide active travel for cyclists, walkers and horse riders into and around Cambridge. The final board approval for the Greenways projects was granted in December 2020. They went through the board in a series of phases. And really just to give you a little bit of an update, we now have design teams appointed during the course of this year. So combination of Atkins and WSP will be leading on the various different routes. And what we're trying to do is that the consultants now leading on the main north, south, east and west routes also look at the greenways as well. So there's a bit more joined up thinking, hopefully coming out of the design process and sharing of knowledge and information. So looking to the west, which is obviously relevant to yourselves, there's been good progress made on the Cambourne Greenway. So that's one of the first we're hoping to be able to quite soon come back and start talking to local communities about in terms of design features, but we're also now moving forward on Haslingfield and Barton as well. And as I mentioned previously, we will also look at the potential opportunities for linking the Cambourne route into Hardwick and Bourne, particularly with the opportunity for funding from Bourne Airfield to complement what we're doing at the moment. So the aim, and you can see from the map, is not just the greenways to work in isolation, but to start looking at interconnectivity. So this really does start forming a network between the different parts of West Cambridge and complementary to what we're doing with, for example, the walking cycling way along the Cambourne Cambridge scheme. So in terms of the current activities, what the design teams are doing right now is really focusing on technical design work, including further environmental impact assessments. Although these are walking cycling schemes, they will have impact assessments and we will need to look at what the issues are. We're starting the process of identification of landowners and, where appropriate, negotiation with landowners about access to that land. And we'll also be looking at the next stage of business case preparation. Again, although these schemes are much smaller than something like Cambourne Cambridge, they still will take significant public money, and we will be presenting a business case for investment on those. The next steps, during next year, the initial design work should be completed for all the schemes, and we will then go out and engage with stakeholders and local communities and the public. It'll be very much around a much more local level of consultation than we did last time. So with the actual affected communities. The outline business case for all the greenways should be completed next year as well. And the aim is for a progress review by the executive board in the middle of next year. The aim is that by the end of next year, where we're building on highway land, we should be able to start work already. There may be other places where we can do that by agreement, and we don't need additional planning permission. Obviously, where we need additional planning consent, we need to sort of finalise land deals or any compulsory purchase of land. That will take a little bit longer, and completion is currently programmed for 2025. Just to add to that, on Madingley Road, not formally a greenway, but as I said earlier, is something that grew out of the Cambourne Cambridge project. An updated design along with new costings and updated business case will also go to the GCP Executive Board in 2022. So although it's not formally a greenway, we'll also develop it alongside those projects. And again, the aim is to engage with local residents and stakeholders on those new designs early to the middle of 2022 as well. So just a little update as to where we are on greenways at the moment, but again, happy to take any questions on that.
Thank you, Joe. Yeah, if anyone has any questions, just the same drill. You can either raise your hand or put them in the chat. And please, if you want everyone to see your question, then make sure you've selected everyone. Don't see any questions yet, but I'll give it a few minutes. Looks like nothing is coming through. Nobody with their hand raised. Nothing in the chat. Okay. So I think we're good. Oh, hold on, was that no, right, we have a couple of questions now. From Alan. So the previous project management team referred to Greenways extension through Hardwick. Will the Cambourne Hardwick Greenways project have an underpass at Scotland Road?
I think those are two different questions. So
sorry, that was two questions that I ran together.
The first one is we'd previously referred to a Greenways extension through Hardwick. I think that was actually shown on the map that I showed you just now, and that is yeah, potentially the Cambourne Greenway will be extended up towards Hardwick and Bourne Airfield, but that was on the map I showed previously. So the intention is still to look at that as an option. Partly, if there'll be the option, there'll be the connectivity online from Long Road on the Cambourne Cambridge scheme, but we'll also look at connectivity to Bourne Airfield. And I mean, I think, Alan, you're actually well aware that there's negotiation ongoing at the moment with the developer of Bourne Airfield as to the connectivity provided there. So, you know, the aim is certainly to ensure there's good connectivity there. In terms of the other question, I think there's possibly some confusion on that one. The Cambourne Hardwick Greenways will not have an underpass at Scotland Road. I'm wondering if you're referring to Long Road, where we are looking at whether or not it's practical to provide an underpass. It wouldn't be Scotland Road because Scotland Road's to the north of the A428 and we're to the south. Yeah, so Long Road. So yeah, so we are looking at that. I mean, that there's a couple of issues. We're looking both at the cost of it, but also the feasibility. It's in an area where there is a stream nearby. There's issue about whether or not you'd have to sort of pump it out to stop it becoming flooded and things like that. So there's not a firm view on that yet, but we're aware that that would be a desirable thing. I think the other thing that's probably worth saying is we're also aware that Long Road currently the traffic is too fast. It's not an attractive route for non-motorized users anyway. So the alternative is that we take a bit of a look at Long Road and see whether what we can actually do is start changing the nature of it and making it less of a long straight drag, which it is at the moment. And Alan's question, north-south through Hardwick, yeah, again, that ties in with potential access to Bourne Airfield. So the answer is possibly. We will continue discussion on that, and again, happy to talk to you about that at the parish council.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, Joe. Right, I'm just checking to see if there are any more questions. I don't see anyone with their hand. There's no more questions in the chat. And I think they would have come through by now. So I'm going to thank you very much, Joe, and I'm going to hand back to Tom to close the meeting.
Thank you, Joe, and thank you, Joe. It's almost like we planned that. For your time tonight, Joe, and answering all those questions. And thank you also to Isabel for her presentation earlier. And thank you to all our attendees for asking questions tonight. I hope it's been useful, and I'll now bring this meeting to a close. Thank you for your time.